Those of us who have fought these wars do not want to fight another one. I could see it coming. Two planes came in from on high, way up high, a couple of thousand feet, and they drove straight down. Of course, they were firing their guns all the way, but they weren't worried about hitting a ship with bullets. Their aim was for the deck. And one of them was splashed and the other one went in our deck. My wife and I have been blessed. We've had a great life, and I wouldn't change anything.
Valor Magazine sitting down with Burke Landry. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, good. Well, I wanted to sit down with you and let our viewers and our readers just learn a little bit about you and the awesome life that you've led so far, and get to talking a little bit about your military service and then a little bit about what happened after military service. Does that sound okay with you?
You bet.
Perfect. So let's start from the very beginning. Where were you raised, and how did life sort of culminate into military service?
Well, I was born in Gretna, Louisiana, and I lived there until I was about 10, and my parents moved us to Pasadena, Texas. And I started school and in the third grade, and met my future wife then. And not that we weren't married then, but we went through school together. And in 1941, after the Pearl Harbor attack, well, there was much patriotism in the area and in the country, as a matter of fact. And at 17, I had graduated from school and decided to enter the military, into the Navy. And I chose the Navy because I didn't like snakes and alligators, but I forgot about the sharks. And I found out when they gave us a swim test that I couldn't swim very well. But that was my choice anyhow, and I was happy with that choice. My dad was a towboatman all his life, and I grew to love boats. I rode on boats, some of his boats he worked on the Mississippi. And in fact, I can go back to the stern wheelers. It just, boats fascinated me. And so I had no trouble selecting the branch of service I wanted to be in. And I did join the Navy at 17. My parents had to sign for me. And at that time, as I recall, if my memory serves me well, the minimum weight for entering into the service, the Navy, was 119 pounds. I weighed 117. And so I went home before I went to the recruiting station. I went home and drank a quart of milk and ate 5 or 6 bananas. I just barely made the weight limit. So then a couple of weeks later, I was taken by my parents and my girlfriend at that time, Lena Lou Coolidge, to Houston at the Union train station, and we there was a couple of hundred other recruits there and their families, and all the trains coming in and out, and the smoking and hassle and tooting horns and what have you. And it was just amazing that those recruiters could get everybody together, but they did, and they gave us the oath, and we became sailors. And we boarded and left for San Diego, California in 1944, October 44. And I went through 6 weeks of boot training there. And I'll tell you what, that was some experience. The first thing they did was to give us the haircut for which boots were noted. And then the meanest people I ever met were the dentists. And when they got through with us, the people who were responsible for inoculations took over. And they became the meanest people I ever met. And they had that crooked needle injected in the you-know-where. And so we complete our boot training, and I was assigned temporarily to the Shoemaker, California hospital, Naval Hospital. But I need to digress a bit here, because they gave us a boot leave, and I came home, and there was one particular incident on the return trip. Of course, I enjoyed my leave with my parents, my family, and my girlfriend very much. But with just on 4 days leave there, it wasn't much, it wasn't enough. But on the way back to the ship, by bus, we went originally on a troop train, and we returned to the ship by bus, and we stopped in Dallas to pick up some more passengers, and the seat next to me was vacant, and the little lady happened to get on the bus at Dallas, and she sat in the seat beside me, fortunately, because she turned out to be a little Italian lady with a beautiful accent. I just loved her. I fell in love with her. And it turned out she was going to San Diego to visit her sailor son. And actually the trip was kind of boring at that time. But about an hour after she got on the bus, she pulled out a knife and a long string of salami sausage. And she cut everybody on that bus a piece of that sausage. And that was delightful, just delicious sausage. And boy, we had a time from then on in San Diego. It was a ball. That little lady didn't need anything, boy. If she wanted something, she got it. I mean, she didn't have to open her purse for nothing. But it was a beautiful return trip. And at that time, at the point when I got back, I was assigned to San Diego, to Shoemaker, California hospital, where I was a guard in the psychiatric ward. And we were only allowed about a 2-foot billy club. But I was assigned to the head, which in naval parlance is a toilet and a shower. And that was in the middle of the hall. And right beside my station was the bunk of a chief petty officer who had what he called a St. Vitus dance. He just shook all the time. Even when he was asleep, he shook. And he had a sense of humor that it couldn't quit beautiful. And we talked a lot. And he told me they tried tying him to his bunk to keep him from shaking, but he was shaking the whole building because the bunk was secured to the floor, and they had to untie him to save the building. But he was a great guy. He's a really nice guy, and he'd been shell shocked, and that's the result of his St. Vitus dance. But anyhow, we stayed there a couple of weeks, and eventually we were assigned to a ship, which was in dry dock in Hunters Point, California. And that was when I saw that ship. It was just absolutely awesome to me because I had never seen anything so huge. I mean, it was as long as a football field, and seemed like about half as wide, although I recall it might have been about 60 feet wide. But the deck was 65 feet off the water, and it was in repairs. It was in this time for repairs from having received a couple of kamikaze attacks, and it was damaged badly. So they had to leave the war zone and come back to the States for repairs. But anyhow, we got on board ship, and we had to stay out of the way of the workers completing the job. But a couple of weeks there, and then we left out on a shakedown cruise. And man, I'll tell you what, the ground swells out of San Francisco were monstrous. And that ship was just a yawing and a heaving, and there were some sick rookies on that ship. And those sailors, the experienced sailors who had their sea legs, they didn't think anything about telling the boots, don't watch the horizon. And I watched that horizon, and I tell you what, man, that is the sickest sick. But anyhow, we carried a boatload of PB5Y Catalinas for submarine duty to Pearl. And we loaded those up and headed for Pearl, and the weather was pretty uncomfortable at that time out of San Francisco. That was February, and but as we got closer to Pearl, it was warmer and much more comfortable. And finally, it was so beautiful that the water was almost purple. It was so blue. And we got to Pearl, and it was pretty sombering there. We saw those battleships there. And I saw the battleship Arizona, and I'd lost a very dear friend on the ship. So it was kind of a bit somber for me, and sobering too. Made me realize just what war was about. And anyhow, we went in, offloaded the Catalinas and loaded the ammunition, the munitions and bombs and fuel that we needed for the airplanes, airplane fuel, and then the diesel fuel for the ship's engines. And so we headed out, and I can't recall just where we took on our flight crew, or just when, but it might have been when we were heading out towards Ulysses. But anyhow, we took the flight crews on. That's the first time I'd seen airplanes land on a ship, and the ship, of course, was heaving, and the airplanes we took on were F-6F Hellcats and Douglas Dauntless dive bombers, and the TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, and but the first few planes I saw land, it was just mesmerizing. I'd never seen anything like that. The ship was heaving and rising up and down, and the landing signal officer standing off the side with flags when the planes were coming in. He had to be very good about having the pilots cut their engines, and then they would land and bounce, and the tail hooks would catch cables and arrest the plane. They'd be coming in about 100 miles an hour or better, and that was just awesome. And I really gained a tremendous amount of respect for the fly guys, and especially when they were landing at night. That was a really, in rough seas too. And that landing signal officer was, he had to be on his toes. He had to do a tremendous job. There was one time there that the planes were coming in, and somehow or other, for whatever happened, he clipped his landing wheels, clipped the deck, and he skidded into the barriers. They had some wire barriers in case the plane got past the arresting cables. The barriers would catch him, and he ran into the barriers there, and he's fortunate he got out. But that was on the way to combat. I don't remember when we took those airplanes on, and I don't recall when they went off and we received the F-4U-4 Corsairs, as this picture might would indicate. But this was a beautiful plane, especially in the air, and they were fighter planes, and the Hellcats, the F-6F Hellcats, they were good planes, and they more than held their own against the Japanese fighters, the Zeros, or Zeeks as we call them. And they were they didn't have the firepower that the Corsairs had, and they didn't have the pilot protection, the armor plating around the pilot. And the Corsair was more powerful and faster, and actually probably was a much better plane because they were still speedy and plenty maneuverable, but they were they had a self-sealing fuel tanks too, which prevented the escape of fuel when bullets penetrated it. And they were a better plane for our needs. But they had one drawback. The nose was so long that the pilots had trouble seeing the deck, and they had completely depend on the landing signal officer. They couldn't see the deck because of the length of the nose. But it had a much larger propeller too, and that necessitated its having a special design on the wings. It was inverted gull wings. Instead of the wings being straight out from the body, they went down and then angled up so to raise the propeller off a deck because the propeller was so large. But anyhow, I was assigned as a plane captain to a Corsair number 12. And my job was to keep the plane ready for flight and for combat. Keep the engine checked out and keep be sure that the oxygen tank was full and the emergency water injection system for the engine was full, and I'd check out those engines, and that was an awesome experience. The throbbing of that engine and the framework or vibration of the framework. The planes were cabled down to the deck, but my thought was those cables are not going to be strong enough and plow into the planes ahead of me. But they never did, of course. But I never lost that feeling. Every time I rev that engine up, I press down harder on the brakes and pull back on the stick. But it was an experience. I can't imagine what it'd be like to be catapulted off of one of those things at 100 miles per hour from zero. You know, it must have been something else. The first time the Corsairs went up and simulated a dive bombing and strafing attack on us. The first plane, couldn't pull out of the dive. It seems that the skin of the forward edge, leading edge of the wings just peeled off, and he dove straight. He was vertically into the water. Of course, we lost the ship and plane and the pilot. But they grounded the planes then, and the crew found out that the manufacturer, Chance Vought, had only one row of rivets on the leading edge of the wings, and so they put a second row on there. Problem solved. But we lost that pilot, and we had to lose that pilot in a $60 million airplane. As we got into the war zone, we even after when we left left San Francisco, we started having submarine evasion exercises, and the ship would be making sharp turns. And I could be mistaken on this, but as I recall, the maximum list on that ship, as tall as it was only 12 degrees. But I think at that time we were probably listed more than that. But anyhow, when we make sharp turns and lists and whatever, if you were a child then, that you'd have to spare your food as it passed by you from one end of the table to the other. But I got pretty good at that too. Well, you was self-preservation, you know. But I guess I got a little ahead of myself there. I pulled KP duty before I was assigned to the ship, to the airplane. And I was dishing out pats of butter on the chow line. And the head chef had warned me, don't give anybody more than one pat of butter. And he was a big guy, man. He was a monstrous big guy. And he'd been in a fight, and he lost part of his ear in the fight. And I was worried about that guy. I was scared of him. And he said one pat of butter, he said one pat of butter. I don't think Admiral Nimitz could have gotten two pats. This chief petty officer came through the line, and he says, I want another pat of butter. And I said, sorry, you can't have one. I said, I want another pat of butter. I said, sorry. He persisted, and I refused, continued to refuse. And he looked at me and says, I'll remember you. But I saw that chef standing over nearby watching me. And there was no way he was going to get another pat of butter. And there wasn't anything that chief petty officer could do to me as bad as that chef could. So, but later on, he and I got to be pretty good friends. He was a nice guy. He didn't remember me from all the other rookies. He was my mailman in our division, and I invariably got every time we had a mail call, I got at least 14 letters because Lena Lou wrote me every day. I wouldn't write maybe a couple of times a week, you know, but it was every day I got a letter from her. And he got a little upset with me for getting so much mail. Everybody else was getting maybe 1 or 2 letters. Here I was getting 14 or more letters, you know. But we got a mail ship about every 2 weeks outside the war zones. But he and I got to be pretty good friends after that. He's a real nice guy. So we didn't have any problems.
During the conflict, what was it like being on the ship and being with your fellow seamen out there?
Frightening. It was frightening. The Japanese, up until my ship, until I got on this ship, the Intrepid, aircraft carrier Intrepid, until I got on that ship, it didn't have any guns on the fantail or the stern of the ship. Well, at the time when I got on her, they had added a 17-foot fantail and put 2 40-millimeter quad guns. That was 8 guns altogether on the back, 40-millimeter cannons. And the Japanese were not aware of that. And we had a Japanese bomber approach us, firing guns, of course, from the stern right off over the top of the water, because only certain guns could train on them that way. They come in from the side, there were many more guns could train on them. So he'd come in from the stern, low on the water, and they'd loop up like that and come down to the, or either that or on a strafing attack, or zoom up and drop the bombs. But this one Betty came on and didn't realize we had those guns back there. So we fired him and hit him, and he veered off to the right side or starboard side, and exploded off the side, and all the debris, flaming debris, landed on the ship there. But the crew took care of it, didn't do any major damage. But later on, we had a Japanese Zeke or Zero come low off the side, from the side, and it's coming straight for my tub. Boy, the guns were blazing, and we hit that rascal at about 100 to 150 yards off, and he just wheeled over like that and dived over into the water. But he was coming straight for my tub, and he wasn't going to stop until he hit us, and that would have been pretty good for me, pretty bad for me. But that was an experience, my first really frightful experience there. Yeah, that was bad. But I had another incident that was really, really dangerous. We were retrieving some of our retrieving our planes, and I was standing near the island or the control area of the ship, and there was an open hatchway or doorway there, right nearby, and this bomber came in. It's a torpedo bomber, as I recall, no, dive bomber. He came in, and for some reason or other, his tail hook didn't grab an resting cable. And he just came in and plowed in through the barrier cables, and he was heading right straight toward where I was standing. I ducked into that hatchway there, and some of the airplane parts fell right where I was standing. So I could have been injured seriously or even killed right then. So I was always cautious after that to watch for those planes. Anything could happen.
Tell me a little bit about some of the relationships that you built with some of your fellow seamen that were on the ship with you. Good friends that you still talk to, or?
No, I haven't talked to them in a long time. I mean, many years. But yeah, there was some, a couple two of them from Texas and one from Louisiana, that we became pretty good friends, and we pulled shore leave whenever we could with together. And they were also plane captains, so they had their own planes and their own responsibilities. But yeah, we got pretty good buddies. Yeah, but and they visited. I never visited them, but they visited. Both of them, two of them, visited after the war a couple of times, but I lost track of them.
Think about probably the most memorable experience that you had while you were in the Navy.
Well, of course, when we took that kamikaze, that was memorable because it was frightening. And I could see it coming because the two planes came in, two Zeros of fighter planes, came in from on high, way up high, a couple of thousand feet, and they drove straight down. Of course, they were firing their guns all the way, but they weren't worried about hitting the ship with bullets. Their aim was for the deck. And one of them was splashed and the other one went into our deck. It was only about 30 yards away from me, approximately 30 yards away from me. But there's some bulkheads between me and them, and so I didn't have any problems. But that was because of the fright and danger. That was probably one of the most memorable. But I think probably the most memorable and awesome experience was when we buried those 9 men who were killed in that kamikaze, because we buried them at sea, and that was something else. I didn't know any of the guys, but it was sad. It really was sad, because they just, they put them in body bags and on planks, and when the time came, they just raised the end of the plank up, let them slide down into the water. That was so sad.
When you got back to the States, what was America like at that point? Did you receive thanks for your service?
Yeah, not particularly. Family, of course, was great, glad to see me. But there were so many people coming back at that time. It was just more commonplace. But I received more recognition in later years than I did then. I mean, everybody was happy to see me, but they were happy to see all the others too. But no, I didn't. I can't recall any other than the celebration that I've seen pictures of in New York, of the sailor kissing that nurse, and stuff like that. But no, we didn't have any particular celebrations or anything.
How did you feel when you got home? Were you happy to be done with it and just happy and ready to move on with your life?
Oh my goodness, yeah. It was. I was ready to settle down and be a married man. I'd like to relate, if you don't mind, what happened when we were going to be married. I came home on leave after we'd taken the kamikaze. I came home on leave and got home on a Friday. And on Sunday, my brother-in-law, Charles, announced to me that he and my sister Hazel had made arrangements for me and Lena Lou to be married. And I was leaving, I happened to leave the next day, 2 days later, And I knew that it took, my own knowledge was it took 3 days to get a marriage license. And I was Catholic, and my church required marriage banns be announced 6 months in advance of the ceremony. And Lena Lou didn't have any preference, religious preference. So we were going to raise our kids Catholic and be Catholic too. And so I told him, I said, well, I can't get a license. And I said, I know that you got to have a blood test. And he says, nothing to worry about. I got you a license and took a blood test for you and you're clean. So, how could I refuse? We've been going. He said, well, a 4-year engagement is too long. I agreed with him. So I asked her father for permission. And he said, no, wait till you get out of the Navy. Well, we weren't about to wait. So we decided to elope. And but since I couldn't get married in the church, we had to go to a justice of the peace. And his office was about over in Liberty, Texas, about 40 miles or so from Pasadena. We didn't have a car. Charles didn't have a car. And but a friend of his had one, Buck. And Buck and his wife agreed to drive us over there. So we left out on Sunday afternoon, and we didn't know whether we were going to get married or not because of Sunday, you know. So we got to LaPorte, was about 4 miles away from Pasadena, 4 or 5 miles. And there's an underpass and a railroad over the top. We got right in the bottom of that underpass and ran out of gas. We didn't even stop. The guy in back of us came up there and pushed us right to the top of the hill there, and there was a filling station that happened to be open. And Buck just happened to have a racing ticket for 5 gallons. The gas was racing back in those days. So we put 5 gallons of gas in and proceeded on down. About another 10 or 15 miles away, we had a blowout. Fortunately, there was a filling station right nearby that had a used tire. You couldn't buy new tires without a racing ticket. And Buck didn't have a ticket, a permit. So we put a used tire on, headed to LaPorte without further incident. Well, we woke the Justice of the Peace up from a Sunday afternoon nap. And he married us in his khaki trousers, in an undershirt with his suspenders hanging down. And when he got through, he said, short and sweet and can't be beat. $5, please.
Oh.
Charles paid $5. It was his idea to begin with. It's only right that he should have paid.
Oh, what a great story.
Oh, anyhow, we came back to Pasadena and we went over to Father's house and told him we were married. And he says, I feel like going out and hanging myself. But he got over it, and he even made arrangements at a hotel in Houston for us to spend our nuptial night. And he loaned us his car, so we were fine. And from then on, boy, it was all right. Well, they were sweet people.
And y'all are still married to this day?
Yeah, we're still married this day. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
How many total years is that y'all been married?
73.
73 years.
73 years.
Wow.
It'll be 73 years on the 27th. But it's been a good life, it has. And we had 3 beautiful children. We lost one in 2001 from colon cancer. But we still have Glenda, and our son lives not too far from here. But it's been a blessed marriage.
So after you got out of the Navy, and you said it wasn't until later on in your life to where you got recognition for your service, were you active in any like VFW or anything like that, or?
Not then. I was active in the Scouts, the Cub Scouts. Of course, my son was in the Cub Scouts, and my wife was a den mother, and I was active in there. And then later I became active in the Explorer Scout movement as a leader. And there's another little amusing incident to that too. I was in a uniform, of course, in a green uniform with a tie tucked into the shirt, and badges up here. And we got on the elevator. We were going to the Shamrock Hotel, a big hotel at that time. It's not gone now, but we got on the elevator there, and there was a drunk guy on it. He looked at me and said, "What are you, an admiral?" Oh boy, we've had fun. But I've been involved in community work all the time. I was a fireman, a fireman in the community fireman, volunteer, and first aid and rescue, and I worked at a refinery, nearby refinery, and I went in there as a still operator, a helper, and I worked up to fire and safety inspector, and that was a pretty responsible job. Issue fire permits and various safety permits and fire permits, and whatever. And then I left that job and decided to go to college. So that's when we matriculated to Sam Houston in Huntsville. I graduated there and became a teacher with a master's degree and taught in the junior college at Kilgore Junior College, Kilgore, Texas, for, I don't know, a couple of years or so. And I left that job and became a infectious disease control officer for the Harris County Hospital District at Bentob Hospital in Jefferson Davis. And I left that job and went back to teaching at a junior college, which is now the Houston University Downtown College of downtown, Houston University Downtown. And then I left that job and became a teacher in the prison system schools here in Texas. And I stayed there till I retired in 1986. And but in the meantime, as a Catholic, I was asked by my priest if I would consider being a deacon. And in the Catholic Church, deacons are ordained, even to the point that if something after my ordination, if something had happened, my wife, she died or something, I wouldn't be able to remarry. I just ordained just underneath the priest's order. And so I agreed and became a deacon. That's been 33 years now. I'm retired as a deacon. But I've been involved in community work and church work all my life. I'm an altar server, altar boy, and what have you. So it's I've enjoyed all my years of service as a community, and until just recently, I can't drive anymore. I'm too old and eyes are too bad. But just recently, we go once a week, to the nursing home and play music. I got into music in junior high, and I stayed in music, playing music all the way through high school. And I left it when I was in the Navy, and for years after. And oh gosh, maybe 30 years or so later, I decided to pick up the trombone again. And so I built up my lip and then joined a senior citizen swing band, the Sentimental Journey Band over in Bryan. And we played all around for charities and what have you. And then I quit that, and I've just been playing once a week at a nursing home then. But I can't drive anymore, so I had to stop that. I play the harmonica. You can see I got a few of them. While I was working with the prison system schools, we were under a lot of tension. There was one particular state representative from South Texas. He was giving us all kinds of trouble. And of course, the school system was down on the teachers, putting pressure on the teachers too. So I wanted an outlet, so I got into photography and became a semi-pro. I'd take wedding pictures and portraits, and I've been lucky on a couple of jobs. The pictures turned out good. I had a lot of fun with it, but I figured after a few years of that, just too much work for an old man.
And I saw from your entryway here, your dining room, that you're a pretty avid collector of old.
Yeah, I've collected cameras for, oh gosh, maybe 40 or 50 years now. And I'm still collecting. I still look.
Yeah.
And I've had friends give me cameras. In fact, that little Nikon camera, similar to this one, but it's a lesser model, was given to me by a friend. His wife died. He had another camera, and he didn't have any need for it, so he gave me this one. So I've had a lot of people give me cameras. In fact, I was at an Eagle Scout Award dinner just a while back, a service just a while back, and I was talking to a lady. She had a camera similar to mine, and I commented on the camera, and she said she had one at the home that was an underwater camera, and said it wasn't working, and wanted to know if I'd need it. I'd like it. I said, sure, boy, I'll tell you what, I'll take it. So she's going to get it to me. Yeah.
You just recently got back from Washington, D.C.
I did.
Tell me a little bit about that.
It was a couple of years ago. As a matter of fact, it was in 2015. But there's a loose organization across the country known as Honor Flight, where volunteers would honor retired military personnel or people, and take them by air to all expenses paid to a trip to Washington to see the national monuments. And my son, is a former military person himself, was surfing the internet one day, and he ran across this Honor Flight Austin, Texas website, and he read up on it, and he contacted me and said, Dad, would you like to go on that trip? I said, sure. So he got me an application. I filled it out. About 3 or 4 months later, I got a letter that I had been accepted for the flight on a certain date. And my wife looked at it and she said, that's a scam. I said, well, I don't know. But she went next door to the Meteor office, paper office, and they told her, no, that was legitimate. And so I replied to them, and they would have even sent somebody down here to pick me up and carry me back home. And so we went to Austin, my son and daughter-in-law and a couple of friends. I went to Austin, my daughter went to Austin with me, and it was just absolutely fantastic. Boy, I'll tell you, the honors they heaped on us, it just brings tears to your eyes. It was so beautiful. But they put us in wheelchairs. I didn't like that because I wasn't ready for a wheelchair. But the oldest among us at that time was 107 years old. So he couldn't have kept up. He couldn't walk, so he had to be in a wheelchair. So we all had to be in wheelchairs. But they assigned a guardian to each one of us, and they would push us in the wheelchair, and they would do everything in the world for us. If we wanted a Coca-Cola, they'd go get a Coca for us. And they all did it on their own, out of their own pocket. And we were flown from Austin to Washington, D.C. No expense to us, but the guardians had to pay their way. Now, they're fantastic, beautiful people. And I had the time of my life. It was really something. They feted us, they fed us, they had banquets for us. It was just, it couldn't be beat, that's all. Just like that wedding ceremony, it can't be beat. And but they do this all across the country for the veterans. And at that time, they were doing the World War II veterans. But now they'd gotten into the Korea veterans and to some extent the Vietnam veterans too. So keep it in mind, man, and make that trip, because, boy, if you haven't seen all those monuments, especially to me, the Vietnam monument was the most impressive. They had a wall there with all the names on there, you know, and the names were in the background. You couldn't see them sharply, but they were in the background, and they had statues of soldiers out there in the what should have been the rice paddies, and God, man, that was beautiful. But the World War II monument was the largest, and they had a column for each of the states of the country, and then they had a big a big lake out there in front of it, and the water spouting out into the lake. It was awesome. It was beautiful. Beautiful.
For the veterans out there that are watching this interview, give some of these veterans some advice, young, old, middle-aged, whatever they are. Give them some lifelong advice that maybe if they listen to it, that it may change their outlook. It may change their direction that they're going. Give me little tidbits that you've learned in your life that helped you.
Well, neither my wife nor I have ever been concerned about taking chances. And when I quit that shell job, my father, of course, he came up during the Depression years. And if you got a job, you stayed with it. But I didn't hold to that philosophy since I hadn't had the experiences he had. But I never hesitated to change a job. I always had confidence in myself and my family and my skills and knowledge and what have you to change jobs. And as I said earlier, I quit work at the age of 32 with a family of three, with 3 children and my wife, that I quit that job to go to college. And I'd have to say that takes a lot of guts. We had a house full of debt. Of course, I'd had some savings through a savings plan at the company I worked for. And so we got our debts paid off, and we moved, and My dad told me, he said, man, you're going to starve to death out there. And a lot of other people told me the same thing. We haven't missed a meal. And we've done well. And so I would say just follow whatever you want to do. Of course, when you get 90 years old, you can't do that. But you look back on your life, and you say, well, I've done a lot of things, and I've had several careers, and I've enjoyed them all, but I've never hesitated to change. My wife would go along with me, God bless her, and my kids too. And if it hadn't been for the daughter we lost, we would have had a much more difficult time. She's a middle child, and she was able to take care of Glenda. Much of the time my wife had to work. Of course, I was in school, and I was carrying a pretty good load, and teaching labs and what have you. So our time was pretty well filled. But we always enjoyed our children, and we took them wherever we were going. We were going on a field trip or something, my kids went with us. And we just camped out, and we enjoyed nature. So these things, I think, have carried us through many hard times, because we can look back on the time. And by the way, take pictures of whatever you do. Be a photographer. We've enjoyed our lives together, and my wife and I and our children. And if it weren't for Glenda, I don't know what we'd do. Not being able to drive, you lose all your independence. You know, that's tough. That's tough. And to do it on your own, just give you up your keys, car keys. That's hard. That's hard. It does take your independence away. We're completely dependent on our friends and my daughter and her family. And my son has had 2 strokes, and he lives some distance away, so he's not able to do anything for us, but he would have if he hadn't had been strokes. He's partly paralyzed now. But my wife and I have been blessed. We've had a great life, and I wouldn't change anything.
Well, Mr. Landry, I sincerely appreciate you sitting down with us and talking with us and letting everybody hear your story. And I am just truly indebted to your service and everything else that you've done for this country.
Well, I thank you for your service, and what you're doing right now is still a great service. I would encourage you to do the same thing to yourself as to what you're doing for me and others. It's history, as I said. It's history, and if you don't do it, that history's going to die with you.